Hello, members of the most illustrious fantasy football league, Eagle Point Butts. It is I, your commissioner, and 3-time undisputed league champion, Chasey Callahan, coming to you live from the Commissioner's HQ. And what a wild week of football we just had. Holy smoke, some games going down to the wire. Some teams looked like they were going to win, and then script flipped Sunday and Monday night. So it's just wild. First domino fell as well for playoff contention. So I thought this week we'll do a quick synopsis on the power rankings, and then we'll take a look at the outlook for the rest of the season for each team. So without any further ado, let's hop right into it. All right, like I said, we're not going to do a whole lot of hopping into the power rankings and breaking that down. I really want to take a look at each team's end of the season outlook. But just kind of doing a quick run through. Zach obviously is still the number one seed. What a close matchup this week against Brennan. I mean, like less than a point basically deciding that. I guess a point because it was like 1.46 or something. I mean, that's nuts. I would be really upset if I lost that. I'm still upset that I lost this week considering I put up 120 points. But I would be even more upset if I lost by 1.6 or whatever it was. So Zach, still highest scoring team in the league by about 50. And then you got Mike. And this is super interesting because Mike is really not that close to being the highest scoring team in the league. Really not that close to being like top 3. But he's only had 1,053 points scored against him. People have let Mike off the hook on some low scoring dang weeks. I mean, look at like the point totals against Brennan and Luke over here. We're talking about a difference of basically 300 between Brennan, Luke, and then Mike. That is nuts. That is a nutty stat. So Mike's still at 8-4. It'll be interesting to see if he gets left off the hook. He did have a really good week this week, I think against Luke. And let me verify that. Yes, he did. Scored 124 points. So maybe he's back. We'll see. Up next, we've got Tyler. Makes sense. 7-5. Big win against Champ this week. That was really I'm not saying he needed that. I think Champ needed the win more than Tyler did there, but great win for Tyler. Up next is Tim, who might be back. Kyron Williams looks like he's back. Jonathan Taylor might be gone. We'll see how he progresses over the next 3 weeks. Then you got myself, which I think makes sense. Brett, who had a great game this week, one of the lower scoring teams in the league. I'm not going to say he's the lowest scoring team, but he's one of the lower scoring teams in the league. But decided to have a game against me. So thank you for choosing that week, Brett. And then we got Champ, who is still not out of it. Brennan and Luke. I mean, that's disgusting to look at. I feel sorry for both of you whenever you compare your points to some other people in this league. Brennan, Luke, and then finally Brandon, which I think makes sense. So let's hop into the next slide. And actually, we'll do this. Boom. Let's act like we know technology around here. Let's act like we're a multi-million-dollar facility, the commissioner's office, right? So here we have safe and sound. Zach's in the playoffs at this point. He's clinched a playoff spot for him. The question is just what's the seeding? These teams are in the hunt, so still very much in the thick of the playoff chase. These teams on the bubble. On the bubble means you're one loss away from being out completely. So these teams are not in the hunt. These teams are not one loss away. But these two teams in the hunt are one loss away. And then we've got Mucho Mondos, RIP, this week, knocked out of playoff contention. Pour one out for your boy, Brandon. Great year for Brandon. I mean, I'm not going to say great year, but great competition this year with Brandon. Honestly, amazing that everybody made it to week 11-ish, right? Yeah, week 11, 12, and still had playoff contention. So, great job, league. Tough to see the first person fall, the first domino to fall. More will probably fall this coming week. Moving on. All right, let's start from the top. USDA certified lead. Remaining schedule, we've got Luke, which screw you for changing your name to Brett creeping in because that's just confusing for me. Tyler, and then Mike to wrap things up. Strength of schedule, I have a strength of schedule as a 7 from a 1 to a 10. That's kind of more middle of the road. But I do think that Tyler is sneaky and Mike can be sneaky. But the cool thing for Zach is he gets to be the playoff spoiler for some people. So each one of these matchups has massive playoff implications. Another loss really hurts these three teams potentially. So especially Luke, it'll knock him out of the playoffs. But Tyler or Mike could also get knocked out of the playoffs with one more loss at the week that they're at. So very interesting there, and they have to play Zach. So already clinched playoff berth. To maintain the number 1 seed, and this isn't an exact science, he needs to win one more game. Tyler or Mike need to lose one more game. Or Zach needs to beat Tyler week 14 and have more points scored than both Tyler or Mike. Now, I think Zach needs to also beat Mike week 15 to be 100% safe. But basically, if Zach wins like 1 or 2 more games, he's the number 1 seed. So I'm not going to dive more into it because it's tough to wrap my head around. Next, we've got Mike. Remaining schedule is myself this week, Brandon, and then Zach. And I think Mike's strength of schedule is an 8. I think it's going to be a tough 3 games, mostly because first he's playing 2 of the top 3 scoring teams in the league, and I'm very close to being number 2, Tyler. He's playing Brandon when he's got 2 commanders on a bye. So he's got Brian Robinson and Terry McLaurin on bye. And on his plus side, he's got the return of Zach Moss. So that could be very helpful at a time where he needs some players to fill in. Road to the playoffs for Mike, win out and you're in. Simple. Tiebreaker game against me this week because I think Mike beat me the first time around. So if I win this week, he won't hold a tiebreaker on me, and I'll just be 1 game behind him, and he still has to play Zach. So that'll be interesting. But Mike has less points scored than Tyler and Chase. He's only up 5 on Champ. And so he's not super close to catching Tyler or myself for most points scored in our division. If Mike beats Chase, then he just needs the winner of Brett versus Champ to lose one of the last 2 games, and he's in. And I think Brett plays Champ. Is it week? Yep, this week. So if Mike beats Chase, then he just needs the winner of Brett versus Champ to lose one of the last 2 games, and he's automatically in. So gymnastics mentally in my head. Up next, Tyler. Remaining schedule, Brandon, Zach, and Brennan. I think that's a 6 because he does have to play Zach, but Brandon and Brennan, we'll see how those 2 go. He's playing Brandon with the Bills on a bye, so that's not great because he's got Stephon Diggs and Gabe Davis. He's playing Zach week 14, and health issues are starting to creep in with Mark Andrews, Chris Olave, who had a concussion this week. It's starting to creep in a little bit, which makes people a little nervous. Road to the playoffs for Tyler. Win also, and you're in, just like Mike. But he's only 1 game up on myself, Brett, and Champ. He has the most points scored in the division, but only up 5 on me. And if Mike beats Chase, then he just needs the winner of Brett versus Champ to lose one of the last 2 games, and he's in. So, more mental gymnastics, and it only gets worse from here until we get to Brandon, as far as the mental gymnastics go. But having the win and you're in phrase is freaking fantastic for Tyler and Mike. I wish I had that phrase right now, but I unfortunately do not. Moving on. Tim. Remaining schedule, we got Brennan's buttholes, Bert, and then myself. I gave him a 7 on the strength of schedule because he's playing Brennan week 13 without Lamar, Cole Kmet, and JT. And this is a massive deal because the rest of Tim's team is basically, like, his bench is on a bye as well. And so I don't know if I'm Brennan. I'm looking at the waiver wire like, what can I take so that Tim can't plug and play? But that's just me. Maybe Brennan doesn't want to scheme that much. But this is like, if Brennan can win this game against Tim, he's right back into this thing. The return of the king, Kyren Williams. What a massive game last week for Kyren. Awesome to see. Injuries are still an issue for Tim. Jonathan Taylor now going out for a bit. Cooper Kupp, still issues with his ankle. A chain now limping. You know, it never ends. You know how the waiver wire has saved Tim? Now the injuries are ruining Tim. It's all coming back into balance. So, road to the playoffs for Tim. If Tim wins this week against Brennan, then he's in. End of story. Think about that, Tim. If you win this week, you're in the playoffs because you go up on 2. Here we go. Let's explain it. If he loses this week, then he needs to have a better record than Brennan over the next 2 weeks or score more points total than him. I'll explain that. So, if Tim wins this week, he's up 2 games on Brennan because he goes to 7-6 and Brennan goes to 5-7. Let me crunching numbers. Brennan goes to 5-8 and Tim goes to 7-6. All right. At that point, Tim is up 2 games on Brennan and he would own the tiebreaker because Tim beat Brennan earlier in the year, which means if Tim and Brennan ended on the same record, if Tim lost the last two and Brennan won the last two, it doesn't matter because Tim owns that head-to-head record. So if Tim wins this week, he's in. That's a crazy thing to think about, that it's all coming down to that. But if he loses this week, then he will have a tied record with Brennan because they'll both be 6 and 7. And at that point, the last two games are all that matters. Who's going to win two, who's going to lose two, who's going to win one, who's going to lose two. That's kind of how it goes. And if they have the same record after that too, Tim better have scored more points than Brennan at that point. The problem is he's currently 60 points behind Brennan in the totals, and that's a tough hill to climb in just 3 weeks. So we'll see how it works out, Tim. Win this week and you're in. Moving on. We've got myself, the boss. Remaining schedule, Mike this week, then Brennan, then Tim. And I gave myself a 7. Maybe I'm biased. I think I am biased. I think that should probably be lower. Whatever. Because I'm playing Mike with Josh Allen on a bye. Josh Allen on a bye, which is fantastic news for me. I don't have to root against the man I love. Austin Eckler will be key to success or failure for me because Austin Eckler, I just needed him this week to just be normal Austin Eckler, and he was not. If he would have just been normal Austin Eckler, I would have won. But he's really sucked the last few weeks. And the Chargers have sucked the last few weeks. And I wish people in our thread would actually watch the games and talk about the coaching because there were some egregious coaching decisions in that game that need to be explained to me. Anyways, good news for me, only one player left on bye the rest of the year, which is just 3 weeks. But it's Terry McBride, and I've got a back end tight end anyway. So road to the playoffs, I almost needed to win out. That means I can still lose one game and somehow make it in. But really, I feel like it's a win or amount kind of thing. If Chase beats Mike this week, he only will be one game behind him and will either be tied with Tyler or one game behind him as well, while both Tyler and Mike still have Zach on their schedule. So, not out of it. Really would have loved to have beat Brett this week because I would have felt a lot more comfortable about my chances, but not out of it at all. I only have scored 5 less points than Tyler, and I'm still 50 back from Zach for most points scored in the league. And bottom line, I need Mike and Tyler to lose. At least one, So, moving on. Bert/Brett. Remaining schedule, he's got Champ, Tim, and Luke. Strength of schedule, I gave him a 6. He's playing Champ week 13 without DJ Moore or Zay Flowers. That's going to be tough for Brett because you're starting to run out of bodies. He's playing Tim week 14 without Kyler Murray or Hollywood Brown. And this is a boom and bust team. He's the lowest scoring team in the division, but he's still 6 and 6 somehow because he just dropped 128 on me out of nowhere. Thanks, Brett. Road to the playoffs. Just like me, this is close to a must-win week for Brett because I think he's playing Champ this week. That doesn't mean it's 100% must-win. Brett could lose this week, Champ could win, and then Brett could win the next 2 weeks, and Champ could lose the next 2 weeks, and anybody could lose the next 2 weeks because it's interdivisional play for the next 2 weeks after this. If he loses this week, he needs Champ and Tyler to lose their last 2 games or lose one, and Brett puts up ridiculous points to jump over them in the point totals. Probably not going to happen. But if he wins, who knows? That's the bottom line. You just got to win the game this week, man. Moving on, Champ. Very similar situation as Brett. He's got Brett, Luke, and Brandon. So I think Champ actually has the easiest last 3 games out of anybody. He's playing Brett without TJ Hawkinson. Good news for Champ. Justin Jefferson is likely to come back week 14. Needs Kenneth Walker to come back too. But I think if Justin Jefferson comes back, if Champ can somehow win this week and go 7 and 6 and then get Justin Jefferson back too, holy smokes, Champ can make a run the last 2 weeks and possibly, I don't know what'll happen. I just don't, because also you got to think Kirk Cousins isn't going to be throwing Justin Jefferson the football. But crazy, crazy things. Storms a brewing, people. Road to the playoffs. This is close to a must-win week, but not quite yet. If he loses this week, he needs Brett and Tyler to lose their last 2 games or lose one, and Champ puts up ridiculous points to jump over them in the point totals. If he wins, who knows? I left myself out on this. I don't know why. I'm dumb. But I just got to lose 2. So moving on. Brand's buttholes. Bubble team. First bubble team. Remaining schedule. Tim, myself, and Tyler. That's a very tough schedule. Brennan last week, I said, had the toughest schedule left because he was playing Zach that week. And what a slugfest that was, man. And now he gets to play Tim, then he gets to play myself, then he gets to play Tyler. So if the Biz makes the playoffs, like, kudos to him. That's awesome. So playing Tim week 13, and Tim has no Lamar Jackson and a lot of players on bye. Plays is just short for players on bye. Really tough end of the season schedule for Brennan. Most points scored against him in the league. This is a must-win week for Brennan. Because if he loses this week, then Tim owns the tiebreaker and is up 2 games with 2 weeks left. If he wins this week, then he's tied with Tim head-to-head and has 50 to 60 more points scored so far. If he beats Tim, he still has to keep up with Tim winning the last 2 weeks. So hopefully that makes sense to you. My brain is a noodle. Brennan not out of it. Tough road still. Good luck. This week is the season-defining week for you. Moving on. Brett creeping in. Luke. Remaining schedule is Zach, Champ, and Brett. Hanging on, barely breathing is Luke. Barely breathing. Bubble. Gets to potentially be the playoff spoiler for Champ and Brett, depending on what happens. Ravens no longer relying on Gus Edwards. That was tough to see. I would have loved to have seen more touches for Gus Edwards in that game. They're moving to Keaton Mitchell. Totally understand. But Bijan is on the rise. So that's some good news for Luke. He's only 1 point behind Brendan for most points scored against him in the league. And he has to win out. Not only does he have to win out, he needs Brendan to beat Tim this week. If Brendan beats Tim, then he needs both Tim and Brendan to lose their last 2 games and have more points than both of them. That is a tall order. It is a tough hill to climb. But he's technically not out yet. So we'll see what happens, Luke. We will see what happens. Either way, I would love for you to beat Champ and Brett for me. Up next, we got Brandon. RIP once again. Pour one out for your boy. Remaining schedule is Tyler, Mike, and Champ. I gave that a 6 strength of schedule. He's knocked out of contention after putting a back-to-back 100-point weeks and losing. Listen, Brandon didn't go out into the night. In the quiet of the night. He put up back-to-back 100-point weeks and still lost. Still could be the playoff spoiler for Tyler, Mike, or Champ. Was not the lowest scoring team in the league. He had more points scored than Tim and Brett. And here is the fun part about trades happening. All right. Let me see if I can drag in this to explain a little bit what I'm talking about. Let's just look at week 12. All right. Let's go to Brett first. He slid. This is me versus Brett. Scroll down here, right? Keep in mind, Brandon traded Nico Collins and Sam Laporta to Brett, right? What is that? 16.4. Let's call it 29.1 points, right? That he traded to Brett that week. That was scored. Let's go over to Brandon. Mucho Mondos. Patrick Mahomes put up 20.8, all right? Now, if Brandon would have played Baker Mayfield, he would have lost about 7 points, right? So 29.1 minus 7 is 22.1. So Brandon would have played Nico Collins probably over Jahan Dotson. So 22 becomes 17, right? You see where I'm going with this? What's the point differential here? 6.7. If Brandon doesn't make that trade, he's not out of the playoffs or out of playoff contention. He's still alive. Brandon, call your lawyer. Call your lawyer, all right? Get some papers served to your best friend who is just waltzing maybe into the playoffs on your expense. What am I? I'm just a commissioner who's interested in the numbers and interested in fighting for my league. So I think there's some questions you need to be asking. All right? Call this guy Bird up. Be like, why'd you do that to me? But anyways, road to the playoffs, close to... Forget that. That's just copy and paste. Let me bring this up so I can hide that down there. I feel like I'm losing my touch because it's week 12 and we're getting deep into the season. Anyways, call your lawyers, Brandon, and tell them I'm serving papers to Brett. This has been your Power Rankings. We're going to the game of the week.
USDA certified lean.
All right, and then finally we've got the USDA Certified Lean America's Game of the Week lineup here. What a awesome lineup for Week 13. You've got myself versus Mike, a historical matchup, and I got to win. I mean, I'm not saying it's must win, but I feel like I've got to win to stay relevant. Tim versus Brennan. If Brennan wins, he's not out of things, and he's kind of in the driver's seat. If Tim wins, he can quiet the haters so quick, quiet the rumors. Tim can make the playoffs this week. Champ versus Brett. Kind of a lower key matchup with some sneaky good players and some sneaky good implications. I mean, one of these two teams can easily sneak right back into the playoff picture. So, awesome week. Been super excited about this week. Super excited, really, about this year. What an awesome year we're having, just competitively. Don't forget to thank Brandon for his service to the league this year. And then finally, make sure you thank our sponsors, the Spikevax by Moderna. The only thing that will give you a heart attack faster than watching fantasy football and your team lose is the Spikevax by Moderna, specifically the spike protein endlessly replicating in your body after you get the clot shot. So make sure you say thank you to Moderna and our good friend Pfizer, who always cares for us and always has our best interests at heart. And have a great week of Football League. This has been your 1-2-3-time undisputed league champion and commissioner, J.C. Callahan, signing out. Peace.
Forever, riding up my way.